Enrico is an Italian architect active in South Africa and abroad for the past 20 years and the founder of Daffonchio Architects. The firm's architectural approach is strongly rooted in Daffonchio's formative years at the Politecnico di Torino, northern Italy, where the powerful chemistry of tradition and innovation keeps producing some of the world's best designs. Daffonchio architects have permanent offices in Johannesburg, Milan, and Cape Town, and have recently established a presence in London as well. I would like to invite Prutha to share the text that Enrico has shared for the presentation.
Will it cost more to create a building that is sustainable, and will the developer get a return from it? This in turn dovetails into a number of questions because we start by saying that there's an absolute cost. How do I reduce it as much as possible? And once I've reduced it, the differential between the base building and the sustainable one, how am I going to pay back the differential through saving and operational costs? So again, this splits up into all the various types of different technical and planning solutions that yield different answers in time, financial return, and difficulty of realization, initial capital expenditure, and so on. Today, we are going to describe two typical projects that, while being sustainable and winning awards for these achievements, have given a great return to their investors, and hopefully, we can inspire these conversations to galvanize more developers to this movement. Besides the obvious ethical and scientific reasons for it, besides the immense return for society, there is a selfish return for the developer. I invite Enrico to share his presentation with us.
Thank you. Thank you. So we're going to make two examples. We're going to talk about an office building first, freestanding office building, and then we are going to talk about a mixed-use high-rise building, both in Johannesburg. And
recording in progress.
To start with, the first building is the head office for Legaro Properties, and we're going to put it on the screen now. This building is 2,500 square meters. Now, to give you context of the commercial nature of this type of developments in South Africa, they are expected to return between 6 and 8% at the moment, with the low interest rates that are in South Africa at the moment. And a 10% return would be seen as a very strong return. So this building in particular is currently yielding 11.6% to the owners, which is an exceptionally high return in the context. And we managed to achieve that while also achieving the highest green rating of any office building in South Africa built up to the time. So this building outperforms similar types of offices, both from a commercial perspective and from a Green Star rating perspective. How did we achieve that? It's through, first of all, looking at the budget of a building. So we looked at the overall cost of a standard building and how to make that as low as possible, also by removing items that are not essential, and then moving that budget that we saved to the green technology. So it's quite a simple approach, and it must be said that it's not the same for every project. I think every context needs to be approached ad hoc, depending on the climate, depending on the client's requirements, and so on. Here we were able to design a very simple structure. It's fundamentally a box the envelope as the minimum possible ratio of glass to brickwork, which is another saving. We minimized the excavation for the basement. We made the floor of the basement in paving brick instead of concrete, and so on and so on. Or every decision pertaining to anything that has a cost impact on the building, from the shape to the choice of technologies, was shifted towards the kind of biggest cost savings we could achieve, at the same time considering the sustainability of the materials used. When we then managed to, of course, have some budget for the green technology, we invested most of it in the solar panels that you see on the roof, and in a special type of louver, which is on the north facade, which allows natural sunshine to come in winter, but it blocks it in summer. And we also used kind of movable louvers that are moved by hand on the east and west facades. And we specified taps and sanitary fittings that save water. So and then there are some other smaller, technologies, for example, the monitoring of the electricity usage and the water usage, and their introduction of landscaping on the site, and various other things. You can see how simple is the floor plan and efficient. And we think we actually created an attractive building that has pulled very high-paying customers, and therefore has achieved its commercial goal, while at the same time being rated the highest rated building in the country. So this is one example, and it's quite a simple approach, and it was quite an intentional approach from the client, starting from the client, giving a brief to us of achieving these goals, these ambitious goals, and then us together with the client realizing them. The section of the building shows how the core of the building, for example, as a light well, and that light well minimizes the requirement of artificial lighting during the day, and helps the natural ventilation of the building. And so on. So the other example is a building called the Bank. Rosebank is a high-rise building in a very busy area in Johannesburg, and it's interesting because it's a very different approach. So this building resulted in a very sustainable structure, and not because the client required that at the beginning, but because specific commercial decisions were taken that resulted in technical choices which were then green and sustainable. And this is very interesting, because the same way that nature finds the most efficient way to build things and kind of run organisms, it seems that the economy is moving towards a place where efficient commercial decisions align more easily with sustainable decisions. And I think that is extremely interesting. We didn't have a brief to design a green building in this instance. The green building happened because certain hard commercial decisions were taken, and we interpreted them in a kind of sustainable way, and the client was actually happy in the end to go in that direction because the cost was not higher. So I think it's quite a different approach from the previous one. This particular building was at the onset, you see the top left, was an existing structure. Maybe I can find the picture of the existing structure somewhere. It's not any. Okay, no problem. Let me go back at the beginning. It was an existing structure that was a bank built originally in the 1980s. 4-story building with 4 stories of basement. There was a lot of debate at the beginning of the project about demolishing this building and demolishing the entire basement and going deeper and coming out with a high-rise structure. That turned out to be very, very costly. So that was the first commercial decision to actually retain the basement and the building and build on top of it and around it, which was technically extremely difficult. But besides saving a lot of money, it turned out to be a kind of efficient decision from a point of view of a sustainable design. And we retained all the structure, all the embedded energy that was there. We then expanded, to connect better the building to the surroundings. So by creating this retail floor, we then proposed to the client to reactivate the street and the piazza in front of the building, which were quite run down and inefficient areas. And to do so, we then reinforced all the landscaping. We introduced more planting, more natural, presence in the street interface, which in turn does benefit the retail. It is a good commercial decision, but is also a good sustainable decision. We then used the existing atrium in the center of the building to run all the vertical circulation of the new extension. So we didn't core, we didn't use energy to core, we didn't take concrete to landfill. We actually just went to the structure that was there and kind of used the shape that was there to create a new vertical circulation. Then after reinforcing the structure, we went up with an additional 8 stories on top of the old structure. These 8 stories contain a variety of programs. They contain a restaurant, retail on the ground floor, co-working spaces on the first floor, and they contain a hotel and offices. Now, what is the advantage of this very articulate mixed use is that it makes the building counter-cyclical from a parking point of view, so we didn't need to construct more parking, dig deeper for more parking in the basement, and makes also the use of electricity counter-cyclical, so there's not huge demand of electricity. The electricity in Johannesburg is a major problem due to historic problems with infrastructure. So we didn't have enough power for this building, and we then this resulted again in a solution that was economical at the same time and effective from a technical point of view and quite green from a technical point of view. That is, we used the existing relatively small electrical connection that the original small bank had on the site. We added a tri-generation system, which then, with the wasted heat and creates, is used as a heat exchange for air conditioning and heating water. So we generate hot water, air conditioning, and electricity with one machine. And then we covered every possible horizontal surface with photovoltaic panels. So these now responds to the power requirements of the building, while being quite, of course, a sustainable choice. So here, we're looking at a structure which is commercially success. It's attractive. It's fully tenanted. It uses very little electricity. It incorporates water saving taps because it is a good commercial decision. And it incorporates electricity saving technology because it was a great commercial decision, and so I think is a very interesting case of how economics align spontaneously with sustainability. And that's really the end of the story, and thank you for listening. Hope you liked it, and if you have any questions, please shoot.
Thank you, Enrico. Thank you for your presentation, Enrico. And when I actually received your title, which is the ethical aspect versus the business case of sustainable architecture, it was really thought-provoking in many ways. And when I looked at your projects, I could understand the connection that what you, as a concerned professional, you are trying to, on one hand, understand the larger issues of the environment. The fact that, if I just look at the case of in India, it has been projected that about the 40% of the population will be living in cities by 2030, and that's a big number. And I'm sure, I think in the South Africa also, the situation will be more or less on the same line. So now this definitely puts a great demand on the housing, on the infrastructure, and the resources on the cities. So it makes the case more and more obvious as we go along for the green buildings. But then, as you've put it in the title itself that there are issues when we talk about the green buildings, particularly when we go to the rating, and those issues are related to the cost, the additional cost. Now, what I'm really want to know, particularly at the 78 correlate building, because you went for the 6-star rating. Now, you've mentioned that you manage this 6-star rating with almost a zero premium, thanks to an efficient design compared to the 12% market average. Now, clearly, there is a role of the design coming in. So, what I'm trying to ask you is, how does the design, and I'm talking about green building rating system, helps in achieving, in bridging this connect between what is ethically also correct and what is also viable in terms of economy?
Look, I think partly I answered to that while I was explaining the building. I think you got to really, when a designer has to shed everything that is not essential. And that goes back to a rationalist type of thinking, which is very much where our design philosophy is rooted. And it's about, less is more. It's about efficiency of structure. Optimizing natural lighting and minimizing the size windows. So, I mean, this is all, a very, I think, technical considerations brought into the design, so that you can actually squeeze from every single item of structure a bit of capital, a bit of saving that you can invest in the green technology. It's a very, very considerate approach. I mean, for example, this building does not have ceilings. The 78 does not have ceilings at all. So how can you afford not to have ceilings and at the same time have a direct market office that charges a premium? You have to design all your services, all your air conditioning and wiring and water pipes very considerately, put them all together, make them very neat, paint them black, paint the ceiling black, or paint them white, or paint the ceiling white. I mean, you see, some of these aesthetics are actually used in a lot of offices now, in maybe a lot of places in the world. But that's an example where there is a big saving, and at the same time there isn't a drop in the design quality of it. And really be very, very cautious about every single decision, so that while we are saving very aggressively on building costs, we are still creating a product that has a very high quality aesthetically. And I think that is the key. And then we have ammunition to shoot at the for the green fight, and we can actually do something quite significant, a significant investment in that.
So
and then, of course, sorry.
Please go ahead.
No, I mean, of course, there is an operational cost saving that is very significant when you actually can run 90% of the building off solar, and you can save water, etc., etc. So that's also why the return then looks so much higher. Is that your recoveries are quite big from making the right investment in energy and water.
Yeah. So, if I understand correctly, what you're saying is that the good design decisions are going to help you in reducing the operational cost down the line, and what you are basically achieving is reducing the operational cost, and the life cycle cost of the project is basically coming down drastically. So, but is it true that even when we go for the green building ratings, of course, we are looking at the entire life cycle of the project, starting from design, construction, operation, and maintenance. So, is it true that the initial cost at the construction stages are higher than the conventional projects?
Yes. So let me recap that in a slightly different ways. If we manage to save as much as possible for the traditional construction part of the building, we can almost cover entirely the full investment in the green technologies. There is still a little bit over and above that needs to be put in, but that is covered in a quite ample manner by this capitalized saving on operational costs. You see, that's how then the building at the end produces a higher yield than average. Does that make sense? So there's really, where we capitalize the savings is actually just a part of the investment that we do, not the full investment. Because normally when you try to pay for the full investment of green technology with the capitalized savings, it doesn't work. It doesn't quite work. You got to have a big contribution towards that investment in green technology coming from the main construction budget, and that's where really the designer needs to think of how to shift dollars from the construction budget to the green budget, so that your operational cost savings have a very fast and meaningful impact on whatever is the balance that you need to cover. Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Another question which I have is when we talk about, let's say, some of the hurdles in achieving going for the green building ratings, etc. Maybe cost is one of the aspect, but what about does it also demand a change in a lifestyle from the occupants' perspective? People who are not used to what are the kind of hurdles that we face when it comes to occupancy? Are people ready to accept the kind of lifestyle changes, or can you achieve the green buildings without any changes in the lifestyle from the people?
Look, in these two examples, I showed that there is no perceptible change in the comfort and the experience of the tenants. That's why both buildings have attracted very high-end tenants. So, excuse me. So, the next building that we are starting now, in fact, next to this 78 Corlet, will be a more ambitious building where some lifestyle adjustments will be necessary. So then what happens? In that case, we are aiming to attract companies that need to have a sustainable profile in the market, or that simply are owned by people who ethically want to be sustainable, or both. Yeah. So definitely the next building will have water constraints that are quite severe, because it will be off the grid from a water perspective. It will be fully off the grid from a power perspective. So again, there will be some adaptations about lighting and so on. But I think it will also be quite unusual and pleasant work environment, because there will be a lot of vegetation internally and externally in the building. So I think the two things can offset. But in that case, you're going to need occupants that are aligned with the thinking, and they want to be in a place that is maybe slightly less comfortable, but more fun to be in, and more ethical to be in, and more aligned to maybe what they want. So it reduces a bit. We find that sadly there isn't a huge demand at the moment, but we hope it will keep improving. There is some demand. So I think this particular next building will only attract people that are quite passionate about sustainable living, sustainable working, and that market will increase. It's also, we can't only blame developers and the commercial drive, because they have to run businesses and keep people like us employed. So we also must ask the general public to vote with their feet, to actually go and rent properties that are sustainable, to buy developers that are sustainable. Because until that happens, things are going to be so much slower. So it needs to be the entire society that moves in that direction, and not just expect the decision makers or commercial companies to drive that. It's not going to happen on its own. Yeah.
Definitely, this actually resonates very well with a lot of thing that we have heard from many architects who come and share that this is not some kind of a magic wand that architect can come and just change the scenario overnight. It demands some kind of an adaptive approach from the occupants also, and the more and more people become aware of it, I think the acceptance will grow. You talked about the builders and developers, and there will be people who want to create an image by having the green buildings, and then there are some who are ethically and morally, they feel that okay, they should have a less environmental impact, so they want to go for that. So are there any structural benefits that as the developer you get when you go for these kind of green building ratings also? What are the kind of benefits that are there any benefits offered by the urban bodies, local authorities when you go for it, or is it purely on the market performance?
Now, at the moment in South Africa, there is no tax benefit of any significance or at all. So it is really just driven by the private sector and private professionals, private developers, and the market. That's why the market is so important, because the market should start demanding that. It is entirely driven by the private sector, and and despite that, I think the movement, call it from traditional building to sustainable building, is actually gaining momentum, despite a very limited or absent support from government.
Yeah. So then basically what we are saying is that we are at the mercy of the market, right? And this has to perform better than the conventional buildings. So when we talk about green building, they usually perform better when it comes to operational costs, right? So you have lower maintenance costs, lower operational costs. So is it that these buildings can be rented quicker, or can be rented at a premier rate than the markets because your operational costs are reduced?
So there isn't enough of a case study for that. I can only say that in this particular example, where the building we completed for the Legaro head office in Prolo Drive, it let very quickly and very well. But it is, a 2,000 square meter building in a context where you have hundreds of thousands of square meters of office on the market. So it can't be really taken as a significant statistical sample. It is too small. But it did work very, very well, and has encouraged the developer to do a second one that is even more extreme and would be one of the highest rated buildings in the world. But these are very niche at the moment. We find that a lot of the funds and a lot of the listed funds are rating their buildings. They're not achieving as high ratings. They may be 4-star, 5-star, and it is again driven by their shareholders and their directors, and it is not part of actually something that they're expected to do. So I think time will tell. I think it's very much got to do with what a tenant does. I mean, are they involved in energy? Are they involved in, if they're criminal lawyers, maybe they're not going to be interested. But just saying that because my neighbor is a criminal lawyer, not because I don't like criminals. He's a very nice guy, actually, upstairs. But there's obviously companies that deal with anything affecting environment or energy would have a direct benefit from being in a building as such. And environmental lawyers, that's something nice about lawyers too.
Yeah, good to hear that.
It's quite niche still, so we still have to see. But hopefully we're starting a more general movement towards this type of buildings.
Yeah. So at the moment, what you're saying is that the more and more architects get aware about it, they start pushing this and start convincing with the good designs that okay, you are going to recover the cost in the at the total life cycle. Then the chances are that more and more sustainable and green rating buildings will come up. I want to ask you about regarding some of your practice, the Daffonchio architects. You are based in Johannesburg, in Cape Town, and also I think in Milan. And now you've started your presence in London. And the context of the South Africa, the climate, the people, is something that's very much similar to its tropical climate compared. I can relate it being an Indian. And so you've been doing buildings in both the contexts, in the European context and also in the context of South Africa. The climate is different, the culture, place, a lot of things are different. What is how is your approach different at these two places when you build?
I must say the main difference is climate and it is culture and history. But I think as far as the approach to local authority, construction companies, technology, it's very, very similar now. If you look at the world, especially the context that we work in, it's South Africa is a country with a strong Anglo-Saxon, Dutch, and European history, as well as African. So a lot of what we deal with in the construction industry is very much a European America type of framework. So when we have engaged now in London in a very large rezoning in the south of London, there wasn't really cultural much to learn, I must say, from a cultural perspective. Of course, the climate is the main difference there. In South Africa, for example, the orientation of a building is absolutely vital because of the strength of the sun, and in Cape Town because of the strength of the wind and the sun. In London, is almost a non-event which side the building faces, because the climate is a lot more bland and more gentle there. So as far as Italy is concerned, except that it's more disorganized than Africa in a lot of aspects. It's actually very similar, but it's I think we're now designing a clinic and a retail center in a town near Milan. And also very, very similar, and also climate much less of a consideration, So really we live in a world at the moment where you are in India and we are in South Africa. We're chatting. The world is becoming small. Is becoming a lot easier to transport ideas, much easier.
Yeah. You just maybe I think I'll conclude here with this one last question, if you please allow me to. You started your presentation and there was a slide in which you talked about the smart cities and buildings. And how do you think the ideas of the smart cities and smart buildings can help achieving better quality of life by, helping architects achieve green buildings?
So in two ways. One is that there is obviously the analysis of the metadata that comes out of a smart city, which then informs design, better decisions in design. That is going to be a massive impact, and it's going to have ethical aspects, and it's going to have a whole lot of interesting conversations around that. But it's definitely going to influence design. The other one is the actual management of energy, water, refuse, transport, etc. In making, in fact, I think that the artificial intelligence applied to the management of precincts and cities is the next big step in sustainability, for sure. Because there's only so much that the technology can improve, in time, solar and everything else. But now, how things can be balanced in a very refined manner. Using artificial intelligence, I think, is where there's going to be the massive saving now in energy and in people's time, in how they enjoy their lives and have more spare time, how they won't need to travel to an hospital, but actually get assessed in their building remotely, educated remotely to some extent, and then. So I think is going to be the next major impact, and is going to have very interesting ethical and political conversations around it, but I think it will definitely happen. As the next thing that is happening now.
Thank you so much, Enrico. It was really nice to see your work, to interact with you, and I would like to conclude here this interview, and I would also like to thank the people who have joined with us on Facebook and YouTube, on our social media platforms. And just as a kind of an announcement, this was our 6th interview in the ongoing series. As part of this series, next Saturday we have another interview coming up with the director of Costford, PB Sargent, and it's going to be a very different context and another different approach towards sustainability. So with that, and hope that you'll be able to see all of you guys back next Saturday. Thank you so much, Enrico. Thank you so much, Enli, for joining with us.
Thank you. Ciao. Ciao. Bye.
Thank you.